Thanks for tuning into Channel 6. My name is Juan Carlos, and I'll be doing the news tonight. Tonight we will be talking about our great country of Colombia and how the murderous cartels managed to gain a sphere of influence in the country. To understand why the cartels are so powerful, one must understand the history of Colombia. The first European to set foot in modern-day Colombia was Alonso de Ojeda. He arrived on the land in 1499, and in his dealings with the local Indians, he came to hear about a kingdom of gold. Although the kingdom of gold was not found, the exploration led to a very rapid colonization of the land. Later in 1550, King Carlos V from Spain established a court in Bogota, and that was under the rule of the Viceroy of Peru. The population of this colony and of many others was predominantly Spanish invaders. With the growth of the Spanish Empire in the New World, a new territory was created in 1717, and Bogota became the capital of its own viceroyalty, Virreinato de la Nueva Granada. It comprised the territories of what are today Colombia, Panama, Ecuador, and Venezuela. Finally, in 1863, it was named the United States of Colombia, and later in 1885 it was renamed to the Republic of Colombia. In 1899, a brutal civil war broke out, which was called the War of a Thousand Days, which lasted until 1902. And now this brings us into present-day Colombia, ridden with drug cartels and human trafficking. But wait, I actually have to leave since it's 10:30 and it counts as a full workday, so here's a short commercial break. Brah.
Kyle's Muscle Milk. Get big with Kyle. Brah. Get ripped.
Sorry about that. Juan unexpectedly had to leave early like he does every day, so I'll be taking over the broadcast for him. Once the drug cartels started to gain a hold in Colombia, they rapidly changed our country's culture. Drug addicts and prisoners are rampant and fear is in all of us. Fear has become part of our culture ever since the cartels became active. Since the origin of the Colombian colonies, our culture has greatly changed. When the Spanish originally arrived, they brought Catholicism, African slaves, and a social system that placed white Europeans at the top. Even after we gained our independence from Spain, much of our culture remained the same, even until today. The Spanish had a lasting impact on the indigenous Colombians. Today, only 3.4% of Colombians identify as indigenous. Now back to the cartel. The Colombian drug cartel problem is so large that they need assistance from external countries such as the United States. In August of the year 2000, the United States government approved Plan Colombia, which pledged $1.3 billion to fight drug trafficking in Colombia. Andres Pastrana, the president at the time, used Plan Colombia to undercut drug production and prevent groups from benefiting from drug sales. In August 2001, Pastrana signed war legislation which expanded the rights of the military in dealing with the cartels. In May 2002, Alvaro Uribe won the presidential election in Colombia and pledged to crack down on the drug traffickers by increasing military spending and with assistance from the United States. More than 2 million people have been forced to leave their homes and several Indian tribes are close to extinction. Colombia now houses the third largest displaced population in the world, with only Sudan and the Congo having more. Uribe has produced more impressive results in fixing his country's ills. According to his defense minister, during 2003, more than 16,000 suspected guerrillas and paramilitary vigilantes either surrendered, were apprehended, or were killed. Since 2003, the paramilitary group AUC has been involved in peace talks with the government, but despite stopping 4,000 troops, the vigilante group seemed as vigorous as ever in 2005. Although the two other major armed groups, FARC and ELN, continue to finance themselves through kidnapping and drug trafficking, governmental efforts have been successful in significantly reducing the kidnapping rate. By 2006, the United States had invested $4 billion in Plan Colombia. The joint U.S.-Colombia cocoa anti-narcotics plan begun in 2000. While officials say the program has eradicated more than 1 million acres of cocoa plants, Colombian drug traffickers are still managing to supply 90% of the cocaine used in the U.S. and 50% of the heroin, the same percentages supplied 5 years ago when the program began. In 2006, a U.S. government survey acknowledged that cocoa production in the country had in fact increased by 26%, and that aerial spraying of the illegal crops, which was the primary strategy of Plan Colombia, was failing. On May 28, 2006, President Uribe was re-elected with 62% of the vote. Economic growth and a reduction in paramilitary violence were believed to be responsible for his landslide re-election. A controversy surrounding suspected ties between members of Uribe's government and paramilitary leaders dodged Uribe in late 2006 and into 2007. In November 2007, the Colombian army captured FARC rebels who were carrying videos, photographs, and letters of about 15 hostages, some of whom have been held in jungle camps for nearly 10 years. The FARC, the largest rebel group in Latin America, has been waging guerrilla wars against the Colombian government for 40 years. Hostages include 3 American military contractors and Ingrid Betancourt, former Colombian presidential candidate. Also in November, Uribe withdrew his support for Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez's attempts to negotiate with the FARC, escalating tension between the two countries. Chavez subsequently withdrew the Venezuelan ambassador to Colombia. Back to you, Juan.
Colombia today is obviously very different from the Colombia that existed years ago. In May 2004, the UN announced that Colombia's 39-year-long drug war had created the worst humanitarian crisis in the Western Hemisphere. The drug cartels and the human trafficking they practice have affected the country in numerous ways. In the past few months, the strength of some Colombian cartels have been weakened. One group, known as the BACRIM, have been severely weakened, and according to a recent report from the Woodrow Wilson Center for International Scholars, the Mexican cartels are taking a greater share of the cocaine that comes from Colombia. Although our country's cartels are in a weakened state, the Mexican cartels are now in a stronger state as a result of this. The strengthening of the Mexican cartels means problems for the whole world, including Colombia. Hard drugs like cocaine are distributed by these cartels, and with the distribution comes tons of violence and torture. The cartels are known for their gruesome murder of those who betray or cross them, and if the Mexican cartels suddenly start to get weaker as a result of military force, there's a possibility that the cartels in Colombia could strengthen back up as a result of less competition. Another interesting thing that was discovered last year is that the notorious Mexican Zeta cartel have a link in Colombia. That means even if we eradicate the problem of the drug cartels from Mexico, there's still problems in Colombia, and vice versa. Obviously, the drugs are being produced and distributed out of Colombia, so we have a bigger problem on our hands. To help deal with this problem, many citizens of Colombia are starting their own defense forces called Conviver. The Conviver are various defense groups made up of agricultural laborers who are trained by former soldiers and are financed by landowners and businesses. The Conviver typically go about their business farming and living their lives, while having some people look out for cartel groups. Once they are spotted, it's like a war. The citizens grab their weapons and take to the defense of their town, to make sure the cartels can't keep growing. The idea of the Conviver is a great one, but sometimes it is implemented really badly. The power got to some people's heads, and they extorted the people that gave the money in the first place. After this was discovered, they were declared illegal, but then now we have an illegal group of people living in a town with guns defending their town. Of course, this creates even more difficulty because the Convivers were so helpful, but at the same time so destructive and counterproductive.